Welcome to the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Join us each week as we sit down with the founder of Alchemy Wealth Management and author of Your Fiscal Physical, Ryan Nelson. Tune in to gain valuable insights and practical tips as we simplify complex financial concepts into digestible lessons. From budgeting to retirement planning, this podcast is your go-to resource for mastering financial literacy.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of the Fiscal Physical Podcast. My name is Aaron. I am here with Ryan Nelson, who is looking smart, as always, sitting across from me and ready to impart some wisdom on our listeners. Ryan, how you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm glad I look smart, but I was going for sage again.
Yeah.
But,
well, you can't win them all.
Yeah.
But awesome. We're going to dive in today to a topic here that is kind of one of the main reasons we started this podcast, or actually Ryan had the idea to start it, about like increasing financial literacy, bringing, just general knowledge that maybe people don't know, or people just nod and smile when they hear things. So today we're going to talk about, financial literacy, maybe specifically geared towards the next generation of individuals. And so, Ryan, I'm going to pose that to you as far as what you see it, because are you 35, 30?
34 almost.
Mid-30s?
Oh, well, yeah, I guess I am 35 now.
Mid-30s, we'll put it like that here when this podcast is coming out. But what do you think, Ryan, I guess, is like some common skills or things that might be lacking or thriving with like this next generation that we have coming up as far as increase or having their people's financial literacy? I don't know if that made any sense, but let's
as far as like skills go, I think one thing I noticed that's just interesting, and I fall victim to this in other ways. Maybe I'll kind of give the example of my shortcoming first and then how it applies to like financial literacy. But
sure.
So completely unrelated to finances, I'm a terrible speller. Like terrible speller. Oh. And, but like, it doesn't matter. I just type my emails. I send text messages. I just spell terribly.
Yeah.
And then the message arrives spelt the right way.
Sure.
Right? So autocorrect, it just like fixes everything. And so, I don't even really like, I just, there's almost like no impetus for me to improve because it's like, there's no negative repercussions. The message just arrives like spelt the right way, right? And largely there's not even like a negative feedback loop where I'd be like, oops, I spelt that wrong. It's just like I'm just typing and then the like once I hit space, the word's just correct.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like there's like oftentimes I don't even know I spelt the word wrong because it's just automatically fixed it and gets sent off, right? So I view like the autocorrect feature in both like basically every computer and phone nowadays as a crutch, right? So I've never needed to be a good speller, and therefore I'm not a good speller. And even though I acknowledge it, there's just never been like, again, I'm just not getting this feedback system telling me, oops, you spelled that word wrong, and then correcting. It's just automatically happening behind the scenes kind of, right? So I'd say that's a crutch for me. It's a skill I'm lacking. Where I see it from a very similar sort of vein, but in financial literacy, is most people's basic math skills. It's like I'll see people almost get this like sense of like panic if they have to do math or math in public, right? And so where I find this come into play, like, is a common example is like tipping. It'd be like maybe if the tip is calculated wrong, it would be, I think, a good skill, an important skill to have, and especially if you're going to be financially literate, would be able to do like quick fractions, right? What's this value plus 20%?
Right.
Maybe not down to the single penny, but within a couple dollars, and then you could just look at something and say, yeah, that intuitively looks right or looks wrong. Like it's within, 17 to 23%. Yeah. Okay, cool. Or, like if you're shopping and, you're going to the checkout stand and, they ring the thing up, they tell you the total, they expect you to pay immediately. Like you don't really have time to do this math. Right. Yeah. But like you should have a pretty good idea if you're buying something and, there's about an 8% tax and you're getting a 17% discount. When they tell you the value, like I think you should have, again, maybe not have calculated it down to the penny, but within a few seconds, you should be able to get a pretty decent feel for like approximately what that value should be. And then, so if they give you the value, you can just easily say, oh, sorry, the 17% wasn't applied. Can you make sure you get the 17% off on there or something? Right.
Totally.
But most people I don't think would even attempts to do that, it would almost be this like sense of panic where it's like, okay, is that the value? Okay, here you go, help me. And then maybe find out down the road, like get home, use a calculator and be like, oh no, they didn't give that to me or something, right?
Right.
So I find that to be like just this very basic skill. Again, I understand why people use it. I think the calculator has just become that similar crutch, right? Anytime we need to do any math, we all got calculators in our pockets, right? It's even, calculators have existed for a long time. They've never been more accessible as they are now. Similar to my crutch with spelling, right? Like it's just, the autocorrect is so accessible. It's just never challenged me to get good at spelling. I happen to like math, so I like just choose to do it in my head, I guess. Sure. I don't know, I'm weird, but
I concur there, man. Like I think that the idea of just that, and I love that you hit that you don't have to get it exact, because if you're my dad, you have to get it exact, and I'm like, sure. I can't do that. Like it's hard for me to get it. Like, but if somebody's like, hey, what's 20% of this? I have like shortcuts in my brain that I'm immediately like, well, 10% of that, it's really easy.
Right.
And I just double that. And I'm like, okay, well, that'll get me close-ish. Right. Like I can see like in my mind, I'm like, okay, well, if it's 10% there, then I just go to 20. Okay. And I'm never going to get it really down to the exact sense, but like at least having that basic. But I think back on some of our podcasts where you're like, well, what is this? And I'm sitting here on the spot and I'm like, I don't know, like right, panicking, sweating and stuff. Like, so I think it's a pretty basic, like a good call out as far as that, like basic math function.
I mean, and we're all doing it, right? I mean, I do math less and less now because of, again, your calculator's in your pocket, right? It's just so accessible. There's a calculator on your computer. So we're all victims of it, but that'd be something to work on. And I think even just, your paycheck, like anytime it's like, like just the basic math where you should be able to figure out like, okay, how much do I make a year? How many times do I get paid? 26 times. What should my paycheck be? How much do I owe in taxes? Have a rough idea of what your dollar amount should hit your bank. A different amount hit your bank. Do I need to go talk to my HR department? Do I need to, right? And again, without like, it would be sort of probably a nuisance to have to like pull out a calculator and do that calculation every single time you get paid, or every single time you make a purchase, or every single time, right? And so just having the ability to do this very quick, rough order of magnitude math to know if you're in the right ballpark can, I think, save you a lot of time. So that'd be one, I guess, skill, I think, to address your question that might be lacking. Yeah. But then as far as opportunities and how that's changed over the like generations, I think, today's generation probably does have access to more resources, which is a good thing, right? As a positive, access to more resources than most other generations. So, just the internet, I mean, mostly the internet's the thing. Yes, right?
Oh, yeah.
But there's things like podcasts, right? What we're recording now. I mean, there weren't podcasts 30 years ago to listen to. And even if there wasn't a venue, the internet didn't exist to disseminate them, right?
Like the radio.
Exactly.
They weren't doing this.
Right. So yeah, I mean, between, YouTube and podcasts and just internet and Google searches, there's just so a wealth of knowledge that people can go grasp. So I think there's certainly more opportunities now. With that though, there's also, it can be a little overwhelming. Like sometimes there's too much information. One analogy I like is like, if you were to go, let's say, fly to Hawaii, right? And there were two different ticket options. You get online and you say, okay, you're looking for flight prices to Hawaii, and you find one for $700, and that's for you to hop in a commercial plane and then fly you to Hawaii, right?
Yeah.
And then the other one, you see a weird ticket price, and it's like for $100, but you have to fly the plane yourself. And you're like, well, I don't know how to fly a plane. And I say, oh, no worries. Here's the instruction manual. I just hand you, an 8-inch book. Yeah. I'm like, all the information you need to fly the plane is in this book.
Yeah.
And it's true, right? All the information you need is somewhere on the internet. But like having the like wisdom of like, it's not practical to sort through 8 inches of instruction manual to figure out how to fly this plane, right? And nor would you, like, a lot of that information is just irrelevant. Like, it's going to be hard. And so there's something to be said, like, even though there's so much information out on the internet, it can be a little overwhelming. Where do you start, and how do you know which information is relevant? So that's probably a negative for the current generation. Is like they just received this huge 8-inch book of instruction manual, everything and anything about finance. Some of it's true, some of it's probably not as true, or taken out of context, and now you have to somehow sort through and figure out what to do. So while the information's there, it's probably extraordinarily overwhelming.
Awesome. Yeah, that was a heck of an analogy for sure. You're like, yeah, for $100, maybe I could do that, but it's going to work out for the best.
Yeah,
like in the end,
I'll probably just pay a little more, have somebody else fly me there.
I'll sit there and have someone else do that. And you can kind of equate that. I think immediately I thought about like, having a financial advisor, a financial professional who handles your finances, because like technically I could do that.
Absolutely.
I have
all
the
information.
All the information is there, but do I want to put in after, an 8-hour day and then I go home and I have my personal commitments, all these different things?
Right.
When do I have the time to adequately learn these things to ensure that I'm doing it for the best that sets me up for the future and my family up? I don't know. Personally, I don't have the time. I don't want to do that.
Right. Yeah. You have other priorities.
I have other priorities.
Prefer to spend your time on.
Exactly. It's time. And I think that it's well worth spending the money to have something that you feel like you feel confident that it's being done right and being done to the best in your best interest, if you will, too. So, little plug there as far as that goes. But,
yeah, there you go.
Yeah. Second question here, and this one's really always been interesting to me ever since I started having to kind of manage finances when I was 18, 19, something like that. Like, I don't know, Ryan, what are your thoughts on why like financial literacy is often, I don't know if you want to call it overlooked in traditional education? Like you have like your classes in high school and leading up into college, and maybe you have some in college too, but you don't really have I can't remember taking a financial class in high school specifically. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know.
I do think that is changing in some places. I know some schools are slowly implementing some financial literacy classes, which is awesome.
Yeah.
I don't think it's like widely accepted across all high schools across the country. But I mean, I think the main reason why financial literacy is overlooked is because it's still taboo to talk about. And so it's something we talked about on the podcast before, and I mentioned in my book, and I talk about fairly frequently, but it's just not like socially accepted to talk about finances. And so again, if you're not talking to your parents about how much they make, and your kids about how much you make, and your best friends about how much they make, and your coworkers about how much they make, if none of those questions are like socially okay to ask, then where are you learning about how to use your money, like where to invest it, right? And so as long as it's like socially unacceptable to ask those questions to the people who are closest to you, it's really hard to like kind of progress and improve that financial literacy. So I mean, I think in theory, I don't have an answer for it, but in theory, the best solution is for it to not be taboo, right?
Yeah.
But maybe it getting implemented slowly in high schools and like being more matter of fact and stuff, maybe that's a step in the right direction where slowly it will become less and less taboo. Interesting.
And I feel like with the phrase like taboo and these certain things about, I feel like the more, as long as it's not something that's maybe like hurting people, like I feel like starting the conversation and just talking about it is a big step with these things of asking questions and asking like, hey, like, this seems kind of important. Like, why don't we do that? And like asking people and seeing what the answer is and what, is there a good answer to it? Because if there is, like, okay, cool, like I can accept that. But if there's not, and people are just like, oh, well, we just don't want to talk about money or whatever, it's like, well, yeah, I mean, I think also sex education's a big deal too, because but that's also taboo, and people don't like to talk about that too. So I feel like but it's necessary in certain cases if it's done in a way that is going to benefit our generation, future generations, and such too. Yeah. So I don't know. It's just food for thought. We don't have an answer to these things. A lot of these things we don't have answers to, but something to at least start the conversation on to get the gears a whirling in the mind.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we'll go ahead and pause right here, Ryan. We'll be right back on the other side of this. Everybody hang tight.
And now, to put the personal in personal finance.
Welcome back to this side of the Physical podcast. I'm still here with Ryan, and Ryan, on this side of the podcast, we like to talk about some personal things, maybe some trivia questions sometimes. But today, I got a question here for you, and this is always a fun one. Where or when do you feel the most comfortable or in your element? Like, this could be inside of work, outside of work, like just in general, just in life. Like, where do you feel the most comfortable at?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a hard question. As I started to think about it, I was like, man, I don't know. I don't feel like I've been uncomfortable like that much recently.
Sure.
But I like the idea of like pushing yourself and doing uncomfortable things.
Uh-huh.
I love that idea of like getting comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
As I thought back on it, I was like, well, I have done a lot of things in my life that, were uncomfortable. I do wonder if I have become more comfortable at being uncomfortable. Like I was, not a swimmer. I was like kind of scared of swimming, and I did an Ironman, right? That was something that made me really uncomfortable. But after you do it enough, you get comfortable sort of with that feeling, right? At Edward Jones, when I started my career, you had to go at this point in my career, I was, what I believed to be fairly educated at a mechanical engineering degree, a master's in business administration, right? And I'm going door to door, knocking on people's doors, trying to get clients. And that's a very, very uncomfortable scenario, right? People are like,
sure.
Most people are nice, but some are not so nice, or, shutting doors in your face and stuff. It's like, gosh, that's really uncomfortable. Or even just to try to kind of sell yourself like that is just very uncomfortable. And so, I wonder if maybe I am doing a decent job of becoming more comfortable being uncomfortable, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And, I think like a couple things that most people that know me would say like, oh yeah, Ryan like doesn't dance or doesn't like dancing. Right. And that's true. Like that'd be one thing that I'd say I'm probably uncomfortable in, but like me and my fiance, Katie, have taken some dance lessons and, for in preparation for our wedding and our first dance. And so I think there's a couple of things there. One, I'll be more comfortable on my first dance, having taken these lessons. Right. But also I am, even in these lessons, it would be something that I'm not necessarily super comfortable in, but also just the more you do that type of thing, the more slowly you become more and more comfortable, right? So I think maybe the answer to your question is just become more comfortable at being uncomfortable and just doing things that sort of scare me. And at this point, like maybe it's sort of a little bit of a win, the fact that like I don't perceive myself as being all that uncomfortable, although I am doing things that like traditionally I wouldn't have done.
Right.
So that's kind of cool. But maybe to more directly answer your question, like I love playing games, like board games, tailgating games like ping pong, cornhole, those types of games, any kind of sport or watching sport. I always enjoy that stuff. So maybe that's where I'm in my element the most.
Sure.
What about you? When are you in your element or most comfortable?
And I think that you bring up a good point about like, being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And I feel like that is the quintessential definition of like being a parent. Is I haven't been comfortable with it for probably 16 months. Like, and my son's about 16 years old. Like, and you're just never like can fully like relax in certain things, and you just have to kind of learn how to adapt to it and be comfortable. Like, oh no, he had a blowout and he pooped all over the place. Now I got to clean this up on the airplane, like kind of thing. Like you have to just kind of get comfortable rolling with the punches. So I think that's an amazing skill. Like you mentioned, like dancing and these certain things. Also not really my forte. Like it's like, all right. But I think that's a great skill to develop. And if you can kind of think back and you're like, well, I haven't really been that uncomfortable recently. I feel like you are doing a pretty good job with these certain things. But for me, and this is something that I've felt since I can really remember. I love being at a party. I think at a social gathering, I think that is so cool. Normally, I will say, like, if there's alcohol involved, it also helps too. But just in general, like being at like a social gathering, I love going around and talking to people. And like people tend to, in the certain environment, like your Christmas party, you hold an annual Christmas party every year. I love that party. I think that is so cool. You see new people, old people who've been coming for 10 years or however long you've been putting it on now for. And like, I just love you plopping up on your counter and just talking with people in your kitchen and these things. I think that is truly sometimes where you like, I think, and I'm like, wow, this is like, I want to do this all the time. Like this is what I want to do. Like, how do I find a job that pays me to just do this? Like, so I think that's truly where I really enjoy being in that element. And it's something that I look forward to anytime there's these events. I'm like, all right, like we get to go do this. Like, this is going to be fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, those are always fun.
Yeah, but awesome. Well, I appreciate you sharing, Ryan. Thanks to all the listeners again. Please let us know if you guys have any topics you want us to cover. We had a couple of, we had a buddy like text us and say, hey, like this is something I want to do or want to cover. Could you guys do an episode on this? And that's all it takes. Just let us know. If you guys got any burning questions, no stupid questions as well. I always tell people that, like, no stupid questions, just stupid people. But
yeah,
just kidding.
If it's a stupid question, we'll filter it out.
Yeah, exactly. We'll filter it out. We won't even talk about it. We'll make it work. But anyway, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. Ryan, go ahead and end us out here, my man.
As always, stay the course.
Thank you for joining us for the Fiscal Physical Podcast. Until next time, happy listening. And as always, stay the course. If you have a question or topic suggestions, please email us at podcast@alchemywealth.com. If you enjoyed today's discussion, subscribe to the podcast to ensure you never miss an episode. And consider leaving us a rating and review on your favorite platform. This helps other listeners like you find the show. For more resources, you can visit Alchemy Wealth Management's website at www.alchemywealth.com or find your Fiscal Physical, the book, on Amazon. We'd be remiss if we didn't mention that personal finance is just that, personal. Please don't take anything we say as advice. The preceding content is for informational and entertainment purposes only. It's not an offer or a solicitation, nor should it be construed or relied upon for tax, legal, or investment advice. It doesn't consider your personal financial situation or objectives and may not be suitable for you.